Hello, I'm Rick Sinding. It's Wednesday, October 16th, 2013. Amazingly enough, it's election day here in New Jersey. We're electing a United States Senator in a special election, but that's not the reason we're here today at the Eagleton Institute of Politics at Rutgers University. But for the Center on the American Governor, I'm interviewing Dan Dalton, who served in the New Jersey legislature, both the Assembly and Senate, and later as Secretary of State in Governor Jim Florio's administration. Dan, welcome to Eagleton.
Thanks. It's great to be here, Rick.
Let's start with a little bit of background about you, biographical information. Where did you grow up? Where did you go to school? What was your early professional career? What did you want to be when you grew up?
I grew up in Glassboro, New Jersey, which is Gloucester County, and attended school there locally, and went on to Gloucester Catholic, where I graduated high school. And from there, I went to a small school in Northeast Pennsylvania, King's College.
In Wilkes-Barre.
In Wilkes-Barre, Wilkes-Barre, Pennsylvania. When I graduated from King's, I had a brief stint in the Peace Corps in West Africa. Came back from that and taught for a year at an elementary school in our area, St. Mary's in Williamstown, and then went back to Tennessee, to Memphis, and got my master's degree in public administration. Mm-hmm. So that's my academic background. During those stints, either teaching or going to graduate school, I met Jim Florio, and that was probably back in the early 70s. And he was I think he was a first-term assemblyman at the time, mm-hmm. and very interested in becoming congressman from our area. And so that's how I met Jim, through his early political campaigns for the U.S. House. Mm-hmm. He ran in the early 70s against an incumbent by the name of John Hunt. And John was our local congressman. And interestingly enough, my dad, who was in politics, I'm very involved in politics locally, he was the mayor of Glassboro, and a Gloucester County freeholder, a Democratic chairman from Gloucester County, was adamantly opposed to John Hunt. I mean, it just did not feel John Hunt was the kind of congressman that certainly he wanted representing him.
Yeah, Gloucester County and South Jersey in general was a pretty Republican.
Very Republican,
time, right?
Yeah. The district, the first congressional district at that time, had been represented by a Republican for over 100 years. And John Hunt was a dyed-in-the-wool, right-wing Republican.
By 1970s standards.
By 1970s.
Probably differentiate that from today's politics.
Exactly. And so the times, too, were interesting because, we were all sort of growing up at that time politically, and we had just left the era. We were still in Vietnam. We had the 1968, the assassinations. So at that point, when you were coming out of school, undergraduate or graduate, we had a high level of political consciousness, and so being raised in the family where I guess the two main conversations around our dinner table were politics or Philadelphia sports. That's sort of the atmosphere and the environment that I grew up in.
Did you always think that you would run for office, or
No, no.
But you were always politically interested.
Yeah, I was always politically interested because it was it was sort of part of growing up in my family. There were 8 of us, and when we sat down for dinner, as I said, there were 2 subjects. There was either politics or there were sports.
You said there were 8 of you, your parents and 6 children, or 8 children?
Oh, 8 children.
Oh,
yeah,
right.
yeah.
Where do you fall?
I am number 4 in the pecking order.
Right smack in the middle.
You're right smack in the middle. Yeah. So, my brother Sean still is involved. He's the prosecutor in Gloucester County.
And also served in the legislature. As I recall.
Sean served in the assembly for a couple terms as well. So, again, my dad was mayor. He was freeholder. So politics was part of our.
So you met Jim Florio through your father? I mean, through the fact that you were he was actively involved in politics, and Jim was a fledgling Democratic office holder.
Yeah,
so.
he was a first-term assemblyman running against a long-time Republican incumbent, and that's how I first got involved with Jim Florio.
So was that the 72 election that I think he lost, or was it the 74 election?
It was the 72 that he lost. He ran. McGovern was at the top of the ticket, and
that, as they say, was that.
That was that. But it was interesting because even though you had McGovern at the top of the ticket in a very strong Republican district, Jim Florio ran amazingly well, and really made inroads, particularly into Gloucester County, that had never been made by any Democrat before.
Why do you think that was?
I think there was a couple reasons for that. Number one, he worked so diligently. I mean, he was at a tremendous work ethic. He's one of the politicians when you would say when 2 or more are gathered together, Jim Florio will appear. I mean, he was just omnipresent in the district. And so that type of energy, I think, certainly had an impact. I think those were the days, too, that as a politician, good old-fashioned shoe leather, knocking on doors, the coffee klatches, that sort of one-on-one retail politics really made a difference. Now, today, obviously, if you're not on TV, you're not real. Your candidacy is not considered real. That wasn't the way it was then. Additionally, I think because of the era, Jim attracted people such as myself, young people who felt that there was obviously government could play a significant positive role in the lives of people.
Now, the first district at that point was still fairly rural, as I recall, but beginning to become more
suburbanized. Yeah.
And would that also have been an indication that the Philadelphia suburbs were spreading, and that it was a more diverse population and perhaps becoming more politically independent at that point?
I think so. I still think it was a tough district. I mean, it was still predominantly rural, at least the Gloucester County part of it, where Jim's base, which was Camden County, obviously, I think it was more a Philadelphia suburb than certainly Gloucester County was.
But it hadn't spread out to Gloucester
Not
at that point, which it certainly has since then.
Yeah, it sure has.
Yeah.
It sure has.
So 74 comes along, and that's the Watergate year.
That's the Watergate year.
And now Jim gets elected.
Jim gets elected,
were you actively involved in the campaign?
Yes, was actively. Just had gotten out of grad school. I think I graduated in August, and literally moved back up and got firmly just immersed into the campain.
Full time?
Full time.
As a paid?
No, not paid. I mean, that was not I don't know if maybe the campaign manager was paid, but there was not too many paid people on his staff at that
Now, you
time.
had gotten your master's in public administration.
Correct.
To what end? What were you anticipating doing?
I wanted to work in government. ironically, I think at that time I was interested, and I had made application for a job in the Office of Legislative Services in Trenton. I enjoyed,
which at that time was still a fairly small,
very small
office,
very
right?
small. I remember the clerk of the assembly at that time was a lady from Glassboro. Her name was Mary Weber, and I would go up and attend the legislative sessions with Mary Weber. And it occurred to me, boy, this is something I enjoy. I mean, it sort of satisfies that political itch that I have. I didn't necessarily want to run for politics, but I wanted to be involved in sort of public policy development.
Was Sam Alito running the Office of Legislative
He was.
Services at that
He
time?
was. I still remember Sam.
Justice Alito's father.
Yeah, and a pipe smoker, the gray hair, that you know, and a gentleman. So that was my interest at the time, and so got involved in the Jim Florio's campaign, and he wins, and I don't does not invite me on his staff right away. Basically, he got sworn in January, and I think I went down. He invited me down to be part of his staff maybe February, March, after he was sworn in as first-term congressman. I served on his legislative staff. I used to type his legislative correspondence.
In Washington or
in
back
Washington.
in Washington?
I was in Washington.
So you moved to Washington?
Moved to Washington, and I think I was about 22, 23 at the time. So moving was not a problem. I can move anywhere in an hour with all my possessions, you know. So that wasn't an issue at all, and so lived and worked. I lived in Maryland and worked on Capitol Hill for about 2.5 years, which was at the time probably the greatest education I've ever had.
Tell us a little more about that. I mean, what you responded to the district concerns and letters. What else did you do? How did you learn the ropes of what was going on?
Well, it was I think just by more or less watching and listening more than anything. I was probably I was assigned to the Health Subcommittee, which was part of the Interstate Commerce Committee, which was the main committee that Jim was on. And so his assignment was the Health Subcommittee as part of that overall committee, and that's any correspondence dealing in that area, subject matter that he got letters on and communications from constituents on, I would respond to. Now, the ironic part of it at the time, Rick, is I was not a great typer, and you had to type.
And in those
everything.
days, you needed to use a typewriter.
You had to type, and so I think what impressed Jim Florio about me wasn't obviously was the fact that I was in earlier than everybody and stayed later than anybody.
Because it took you that long to type the
Because
letters.
it took me that long to type the letters. But he thought I had this tremendous work ethic. Well, it's basically because I couldn't type that I was in there that long.
I think there's a little self-effacement going on here.
Yeah.
I suspect that you did work hard. And,
I worked hard at typing, I'll tell you that.
Well, and Jim Florio is known as a particularly hard worker, a guy who's up at the crack of dawn and works late into the evening.
Yeah.
Substantively, did you learn more about healthcare? Did you feel as though you were developing some expertise in that or any other particular subject area?
I thought that you couldn't help but learn. Again, you were surrounded by people who were just tremendous legislators, and again, just listening and being exposed to those level of people. It was, if you didn't learn anything, then you weren't really listening.
Peter Rodino was the dean of the New Jersey legislative delegation at that time, and had was just coming off his stardom in the Watergate hearings.
Yeah, yeah.
Was there a certain amount of star power to the folks that you were dealing with down there? Did you have dealings with other members of Congress or other folks who later went on to bigger and better and greater things?
Well, I often tell the story of being in elevators. I was always in elevators with some people that I was just awestruck by. I remember riding up and getting on the elevator in the Longworth building, house building, and it was and I was rushing to get on the elevator. I stuck my hand in, and the elevator door flies open, and there's Millicent Fenwick, with her pipe.
Yep, of course.
and all she did is said, "Get on, young man."
Did she know you? Did she know who you were?
No, she had no idea who I was. And having a similar experience with Barbara Jordan, the great congresswoman from Texas.
Yeah.
Very similar, by the way. I think I was stopped her from moving along with her day by interrupting her elevator ride. Obviously, Pete Rodino and Jim Howard. I remember.
I guess was Bill Hughes and
Bill Hughes was like Jim. He was a freshman congressman. Congressman Ed Forsythe was
Republican
who was just a gentleman, and was another congressman I remember very vividly, and just I remember him just for his almost his manner, his very just gentlemanly manner when he dealt with you, and so he was, I was fortunate enough to rub shoulders, or not rub shoulders, but certainly be exposed to folks like that, and I think also it gave me a better understanding of the process. Literally, when you served as a staffer for a member on a subcommittee, you sort of then get a real feel as to how much hard work goes into the development of public policy, and how it can be tedious and it can be lengthy, but how much work goes into it and how much thought, at least in those days, went behind it. So I really got a great appreciation for all that. And again, I'm just coming out of school.
Right.
I'm 23, 24 years old, so talk about an education. It was a tremendous education.
What was Jim Florio like to work for?
No nonsense, which never changed.
That's true.
Worked extremely hard, was demanding as far as a boss. He expected you to work hard. He expected you to give him information that was accurate. He expected you to do your job well, and he expected you, if it meant, he really didn't care the amount of hours you were working. You did what you had to do to get your job done. And by the way, that was I felt almost honored to do it. So it worked. I just enjoyed the heck out of my experience down there.
Florio developed the perhaps unkind reputation of being a taskmaster, of okay, I'll be blunt, spitting up and chewing out legislative staffers.
Yeah.
You probably went through more turnover of legislative staff than just about any other New Jersey congressman.
Yeah.
Is that because he was so demanding and the staffers weren't willing to put in the amount of time that perhaps you and some others were? Is it an unkind reputation, or is it a reputation that Jim Florio deserved?
Well, he didn't. He never suffered fools very well, and if you if you weren't, he was serious about his job, and he expected people that worked for him to be equally as serious. And I think people who didn't meet that expectation that he had were not people that he
didn't stick around. They didn't stick around very long.
Didn't tolerate well,
right.
And that's the one thing I remember. And you know, again, from my perspective, I was glad as heck to be there. You know, so I thought it was great. I had a great opportunity, and I wasn't going to, I was going to make the most of it. And so that was. I didn't have an expectation of thinking that I was going to get in there and talk to Jim Florio about, you know, world policy issues or anything. I was there basically to learn. I was there to be part of a team and also to get done the little things. I don't think they are little. I mean, you know, but to get done some of the tasks that perhaps other people didn't want to do, but I was glad to do them.
How long did you do it, and when did you leave, and why?
I left in '78. I had worked in his congressional office in D.C. for a little over 2 years, and as you point out, there was a lot of turnover, and all of a sudden, I start becoming senior because of the turnover. But I also understood that I wasn't, you know, most of the folks back then who had long-term careers as legislative assistants in D.C. were basically they were lifers. They were going to be there for a long time. Right. I had no desire to be there for a long time. I was one way or another. I wanted to come back to New Jersey. I think at that point, that's when I felt that I could. I think I could run for office. I felt like that sort of time in D.C. and on his congressional staff back in New Jersey were the times when I started thinking, hey, I think I can do. I would like to do this.
You came back to the New Jersey his district office.
Yeah. And I thought, and I don't think he was. I basically felt that I could start looking into running for office by being back in the district. I didn't think I could do that so it was self-serving to a great extent. Me asking him to go back to the New Jersey office. I'm sure he recognized that I had then ambitions. We never talked about it to a great extent. I know initially he didn't like me leaving because I think he felt I was one of the guys that he could count on to do stuff, to do the job.
All the things that nobody else.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly.
Okay.
And he knew I wouldn't complain about for the most part.
But after a while, he reluctantly said, "Okay."
He just said, "Okay,
go back to
the congressional office," and I stayed until late '78, and then I left. I left the office. Now, at that point, I knew I wanted to go out and see what I could do for myself, both professionally, not necessarily in politics, but I was ready to move on.
Okay, and you moved on to?
The Dalton Insurance Agency, where my dad ran the insurance agency.
I see.
And I was probably the loss leader in the insurance agency because I was always found something else to be doing. But he paid me like the loss leader too, so it worked. In '79, there was a internal I guess, war that develops with the Camden County Democrats. And it was the...
this was Eric Hetty and...
Yeah, and the 4th legislative district, 4th state legislative district at the time, was represented by 2 assemblymen, Ken Gewerks and Franny Gorman. And they had decided that they were going to be part of the Eric Hetty team. And as a result, Jim asked me to run for the assembly on his team. And so
you took on Kenny Gewerks?
Yes. So
that must have been a fascinating race.
It was. It was.
He was a somewhat, for those who don't remember him, a flamboyant legislator.
Oh, he was. He was
drove a Corvette, dressed in loud clothing.
Yep.
Was a histrionic speaker.
Yep. He was an actor. I mean,
Yeah.
he was on stage.
I can say as a journalist at the time that he was very entertaining.
Oh, I bet. Yeah, I bet. Yeah. I didn't feel that way.
No, I suspect not. He had the nickname, by the way, among Democrats in the Byrne administration of Kenny Gets Worse.
Yes. Yeah.
So
yeah.
Very interesting fellow.
And he was flamboyant, and he was a volatile character, and he's generally in fights with Governor Byrne about something. Pinelands was a huge issue at the time. And Jim Floria was looked upon by a lot of the traditional Democrats in that area at the time as somewhat of a loner, somewhat of a renegade. He wasn't one of the guys. So Gewerks was very suspicious of Jim, and so there was just there was some real political animus there between Eric Hetty and Gewerks. And Gewerks was basically the head of the Gloucester County party. Eric Hetty was the head of the Camden.
So you were the Florio Gloucester County Democratic primary candidate.
That's correct.
And what happened?
And we won. We won and I think basically we ran as the Florio team and ran under that banner. And Jim Florio was tremendously popular at the time in the district.
Also gearing up for his first gubernatorial run at the time.
Exactly. And I think he knew he had to solidify his base if he was going to have any further aspirations statewide. He did that. He won our legislative district. He won freeholder seats. I think in both counties. He then became the leader of the party in the area. And so I was able to be at the right place at the right time. And in 1980, I'm sworn into the assembly.
Okay, and so you spent the first 2 years then, 80 to 82, in the assembly.
That's correct.
Majority or minority at that time?
We were majority at the time. Chris Jackman was our speaker.
Right.
And he was another
voluble
he was Hudson County through and through. My first exposure to a real Hudson County politician, and he was just a nice man and enjoyable and fun, and just again a real learning experience for me.
And these are the final 2 years of the Byrne.
The final 2 years of the Byrne
second term.
Yeah, and Governor Byrne was great to me. It gave me some legislative opportunities at the time. That first statewide recycling bill I sponsored at that time, which was again sort of followed not only my sort of inclinations about the environment, but also Jim Florio's as well. And
had you begun to develop environmental expertise and interest at that point?
Well, certainly interest. I had become interested in the environment because if you lived in New Jersey at the time, in the environment was just had started ballooning as just a critical issue on people's minds.
Well, Jim Florio often speaks of the fact that it was around that time, or perhaps a little bit earlier, that he read Rachel Carson's Silent Spring, and that it was an epiphany to him.
Right.
That actually made him become an environmental activist
Right.
in Congress.
Yeah.
Did you have a similar epiphany, or was it more of a?
No.
It was more a function of the times.
It was more a function of my district, I think. It was, if one of the landfills that's most notorious
Bedford.
in New Jersey. Yeah, there was the famous Kinsley landfill,
right. Yeah.
and about 4 miles from there was another landfill called the Gems landfill, and the Gems landfill, the Kinsley landfill was an example of our basically or probably a lack of a coherent solid waste strategy, whereas the Gems landfill was an example of basically a toxic waste dump in the middle of people's backyards. Mm-hmm. So you had those two things going on in the district. So
and Florio's pushing Superfund at the federal level at the same time, right?
Correct. And so my involvement in the environment was just a function of my district and function of the area that I serve, mm-hmm. More than some sort of academic epiphany.
Right.
But it was real. It was as real, and it was as critical to the people that I represented.
Okay, 81 comes along. It's the 81 election. Jim Florio's at the top of the ticket.
Correct.
Running for governor.
Correct.
Were you involved in that? Were you involved in his campaign, or
Always.
were you paying more attention to your own?
No, I was always involved in his campaigns. Okay. The one other great education that I had when I was working and associated with the governor was you became very, very good at the campaign operations. Mm-hmm. Because he generally was running for something almost every year, whether it was
when you're in Congress,
you're every other year, and then he's running. He has aspirations for governor, and so I'm involved in his campaigns, at every.
So while you were on the congressional staff,
correct,
because there's a fine line there of what you're allowed to do and not allowed to do, but.
In his first race against Governor Byrne, he in the primary.
Oh, that's right. I forgot about that.
This
is the 77.
Yeah,
primary.
we went off staff and worked on his political staff at the time. Uh-huh. We lived up in a motel in East Orange. And there was 3-4 of us that were his North Jersey campaign operation. Mm-hmm.
You having absolutely no knowledge of North Jersey at this point, I assume?
None.
Okay.
None at all. All we had was our youthful enthusiasm. Mm-hmm. And
who were the other people involved? Do you recall?
Joe Salima was in North Jersey. A good friend of mine, Chuck Manella, was up there in North Jersey. Mm-hmm. And then, we were basically it. We were the 3 folks that were charged with getting Jim around in North Jersey. Mm-hmm. And so that was another great education. Particularly you're up in Essex and Hudson County where, right. As a young person, fairly naive, fairly, not clued into the local politics. Talk about getting bounced around.
Oh, and that 77 primary was a fascinating primary, too. I mean, where so many people jumped in because they thought Byrne was so vulnerable that he ended up winning the renomination with something like 30% of the vote.
Exactly. Yeah. So I would, at that time, I would go off of his congressional staff and go on his political staff. When I was in office, I had the luxury. First of all, I didn't get paid by him because I had a legislative salary. I was single. If I had $10 in my pocket, I thought I was rich, and so I would be going off to wherever he needed me to go off to, and again, enjoyed the opportunity.
So you were a surrogate in the '81 election. Did you go off and represent him?
Yes, sure.
Places?
Sure, yeah.
Was your seat so secure at that point? Now, are you also running for Senate at the time?
Yeah, at that time, we're
back to '81 now.
Yeah, we're back to '81. We have ABSCAM, by the way. That is sort of erupts locally. And Ericetti gets caught up in it. The state senator from my district is implicated in the scandal, Joe Maressa, and so Maressa leaves the ticket and leaves the Senate. So I am now the Senate candidate in 1981 from the 4th Legislative District. Again, opportunity presents itself, being at the right place at the right time.
And with Florio at the top of the ticket, I assume it's still reasonably competitive, but you've got a pretty good...
Yeah, I run against Goertz again.
Goertz ran for Senate. Okay, in the primary.
In the primary.
Right.
Okay, I win the primary and then win the general election. And so... in 1982, I'm sworn into the Senate. Carmen Arecchio is the Senate president. There are 23 Democrats.
From Essex County. By this time, you know Essex County like the back of your hand.
Exactly. I've gotten bounced around up in Essex County more than a lot of people at that point, and Hudson County. And because there was only 23 Democrats, there was chairmanships available immediately. So I become the chair of the Senate Energy and Environment Committee, where I continued on until 1990, and chaired the committee during that period of time, which is again,
Democratic control of the Senate the entire time that you were
correct.
You were in office.
Yes. So the Assembly changed, but the Senate was in Democrat control, and the two presidents then were Carmen and John Russo were the Senate presidents, and then lastly John Lynch
and Alan Karcher over in the
and
Assembly.
Alan Karcher over the Assembly. So it was.
Those were interesting times. So you're working with a Republican governor.
Yep.
And a Democratic Senate.
Right.
And got quite a bit of environmental legislation passed.
Correct.
And I assume at this point you're now beginning to develop some real expertise in that subject area.
Yeah. Again, basically, I now chaired a committee which was as important to my district as any committee in the legislature, and also had statewide significance because of the number of issues that New Jersey was trying to address at the time. You also had a political environment that lent itself to addressing these issues.
Right.
I mean, the public was in full support of attempting to address these issues.
And there was a series of events that occurred throughout the 1980s. Bhopal in India, which led directly to the right to know law that which you were the prime sponsor.
Right.
You had needles washing up on the shore. You had
dioxin in Newark,
dioxin, radon.
radon.
Yes, it seemed like every time you turned around, there was another environmental scare of some sort.
Exactly. And basically, the science, I don't think, was anywhere close to the politics or the policy at the time. I mean, we were catching up. We were attempting to catch up, and so oftentimes we may have been guilty of overreach as far as some of our legislative attempts at addressing these issues. But I think the politics demanded it at the time that we be aggressive. And certainly looking back on it now in hindsight, I think the science didn't really catch up to the policy, and as a result, there may have been some things that we did that were a result more of our political overenthusiasm than based upon real science.
And many of the debates about environmental regulation that continue to this day are maybe a result of that.
Absolutely.
Jim Florio's back in Washington.
Correct.
Throughout this period of time, he thinks about but demurs about running against Tom Kean in '85.
Correct.
He's devoting himself to Washington stuff. You're devoting yourself to New Jersey stuff in Trenton.
Correct.
How much interaction did the two of you have during this period?
We had a lot of interaction from the perspective of being two politicians or two public figures who were both aggressive as far as the retail aspect of politics. So I was always in contact with Jim Florio. And I always, I considered him a mentor, and he was my mentor politically and legislatively. He was a great role model for me. So he was someone that there was a saying, particularly in Camden County in those days, you didn't have friendships, you had alliances. Well, with Jim Florio, I had a friendship.
That's interesting because you were leading me into asking that question.
Yeah.
Many of the people that I've interviewed, and most of the people I think who have been close associates of Jim Florio, it took them a long time to develop what they now refer to as a friendship.
Right.
But you evidently developed that kind of relationship with him relatively early on.
Yeah, and I think the fact that he had brought me in early on, and I was always, we were always traveling in the same circles because we were both, again, we were both in politics. We were both represent much the same area. We both had similar concerns and also areas of expertise. Although, I mean, I certainly don't put myself in the Florio category as far as policy expertise, because I think he's truly has great expertise in many, many different areas. But so he was someone that I looked up to. I really did, and I think the people that were his staffers at the time, particularly his local staffers, were totally devoted to Jim Florio and wanted to see him succeed, because I, as well as I did, I believed in his sort of perspective of government and what government should be about. And he had tremendous integrity. He was the other thing that I appreciate him a lot is he allowed. He wasn't a boss in any way. I was in the state senate, and I don't think I ever got a call from Jim Florio asking me to do anything. And by the way, most of the calls were from me asking his advice on certain things. So he was a mentor. He was a true mentor to me.
So we come to 1989.
Right.
And now he is the Democratic candidate for governor,
Right.
and in a much better position than he was in '81. Although that too was that was a very close race. He nearly became governor in the '81 election. But by midway through 1989, it's fairly obvious not only that he's going to win the Democratic primary, but that he is very likely to become the next governor.
Right.
At this point, were you on the ticket to run for Senate that year, or was the Senate up in '89? Were you on the ballot that year running for Senate?
It's a good question.
I don't recall because of the strange nature of the way in which redistricting happens in New Jersey. There are 4-year terms for the senators, but then it becomes a 2-year term.
Correct.
Right after the census.
Yeah, I think it may have been it was 4-2-2. So yeah, I think we ran in '89. I won. Okay. The governor wins.
But are you thinking at that point, or did he give you any indication that he might be interested in having you come and work in his cabinet?
No. I had no interest in working in his cabinet. My decision in 1989 was whether I was going to run for a seat in Congress or not.
Sure, because he was giving up.
He was giving up the seat, and so I make the decision that I'm not going to run for a seat.
Why did you make that decision?
A couple of reasons. Mostly, when I started in politics, again, I was single. I lived in an efficiency apartment. I didn't need much.
No wonder Jim Florio was your mentor. He lived over a liquor store.
Yeah, we were very similar that way. I might have even had a nicer car than Jim Florio, which wasn't saying much. Then I'm married, and I have my wife has 2 children. We immediately have Caitlin, my daughter. And so I make the decision that, and having been in D.C. and understood sort of the what it took to be successful in D.C. As a congressman, decide that was not the life I wanted.
Didn't have the fire in the belly.
No, did not have the fire in the belly, and just wanted to certainly be around at that time the kids. A lot more, but felt that the state legislature was perfect for me, and ran for the majority leader spot, and became majority leader in the Senate. So
now we come to the real nitty gritty, which is the first 6 months of the Florio administration. Yep. You are now the majority leader,
right?
Your responsibility is to now carry out a series of far-reaching, controversial pieces of legislation.
Right.
The first of which is an area that you have some professional expertise in, which is insurance.
Right.
Tell us about that. I mean, that's the first one. That's the first one that gets rolled out, and in many ways may have been the easiest, although not to suggest it was easy.
Right.
But tell us a little bit about that experience.
Well, that was number one on the governor's agenda. I believe his inaugural address was to do away with the at that time, the Joint Underwriting Association, the JUA.
JUA was DOA.
Yeah, JUA was DOA.
Right.
And basically, the JUA was a state-funded personal auto insurance program that was created to become a haven for bad drivers.
It was a high-risk pool.
But ultimately was insuring most of the drivers in the state. And the rationale, the reason for it is because the private markets did not want to write automobile insurance, private automobile insurance in New Jersey, and as a result, they kept...
Kind of ironic that now you can't watch television for more than 5 minutes without seeing a Geico commercial.
Yeah, that's
and
correct.
Geico was one of the companies that did not write in
left.
New Jersey.
Yeah, left New Jersey. So basically, the governor took the liabilities from the JUA and basically dispersed them amongst the writers of personal, insurance in the state, which is tremendously controversial.
Not entirely different from what President Obama is talking about doing with healthcare
That's
insurance,
correct.
right?
That's correct. And
although there it's not the high risk, it's actually the very low risk people that they want to disperse among.
Yeah,
very interesting.
and so that was tremendously controversial.
Primarily among the insurance companies,
Correct.
right?
Correct.
But not with the general public.
Not with the general public. The general public, I think, sensed that we needed to do something. Everybody, I mean, that was on the top 5 public policy issues on automobile insurance, and basically the governor addressed it right from the get-go. So, as you pointed out, amongst the legislators, particularly I had taken a look at this issue for a long time when I was in the Senate. So I sort of understood the components of the problem.
Well, you also had professional relationships with most of these insurance companies.
I
right?
did. I was a broker. So I wasn't a company guy, but I was a broker.
But for that reason, you also knew a lot of the different insurance companies
Correct.
as opposed to any particular one.
That's correct. So
you must have been under some intense pressure from the insurance industry.
You know, I never felt that way.
Really?
No, I never felt that way. I always felt that I never felt like I was there to represent the carriers. I wasn't.
No, I understand that,
Yeah.
but did they not feel? I mean, did you not get a lot of pressure from them to?
Oh,
do,
sure, but you know, it wasn't. I didn't really feel. To me, it was a non-issue. That you know, they certainly needed to step up and be part of this solution, and so I was one of the leaders in the reforms that Governor Florio initiated. So there was no problem with me. I really felt that it was the right thing to do, and the carriers needed to be step up and bear responsibility for some of the problems that we had. And maybe again it was naivety, but it was something that I just thought that this was the right thing to do, and he was absolutely on target.
Okay, the next one is assault weapons.
Correct.
I can vividly remember having a certain amount of fear working in the State House during particular legislative sessions. I assume you faced some pretty intense pressure coming from a district of a lot of gun owners, hunters.
Right.
Tell us about that experience.
Well, that was an experience I think that was difficult on a local level because there was so much misinformation that was being put out by the NRA to the local gun clubs, and you know, certainly our area was well represented by the gun clubs and a lot of hunting clubs. But again, I let it be known that I was squarely behind the assault weapon bill, and it was not a negotiable position that I was going to be supportive and be a proponent of the bill.
As majority leader, how much work did you have to do getting others in your caucus to support it?
It was, to be perfectly honest, I thought it was, for the most part, most of the members of my caucus, save one, were on board with the assault weapon bill. And then Senator Gormley
one from the other side
came across from the other side, and I mean, Bill Gormley's role in the assault weapon bill is significant because the courage it took for him
Absolutely.
To cross to the other side on a issue like that is, I think about to this day, and the pressure that he was under. But he was he decided fairly early on what he was going to do, and we knew we could support him. So we knew in the Senate the votes were there.
Now, interestingly enough, many people today attribute the loss of the legislature 2 years later, and ultimately Governor Florio's loss of re-election, to the NRA, which worked vigorously behind the scenes with Hands Across New Jersey and other groups, even the New Jersey Education Association, which we'll get to that in a minute, a variety of other reasons, did not like things that Governor Florio had done. Do you think that there was any way in which this whole issue or set of issues could have been handled that would have made the opposition of the NRA any less voluble? It would have made keeping the control of the legislature in Democratic hands or keeping Governor Florio's re-election possibilities alive. Do you think there are ways in which the assault weapons ban in particular might have been handled differently that would have allowed that to happen?
No, I thought, I'll be honest with you, Rick, I think that the assault weapons ban certainly was a major factor, and the NRA's opposition to Governor Florio's re-election was a factor in him not being re-elected. However, I thought if we would have done things differently as far as the budget and then the court decision, we could have isolated the NRA and could have survived, their mischief.
Okay, then let's get to the court decision. And actually, the Florio administration moved in advance of the court decision.
Correct.
In the Quality Education Act.
Correct.
And changes to the tax structure.
Correct.
This was probably the heaviest lift that you had, the most difficult one to get through the legislature, and the one that had the greatest consequences.
Yes.
Let's talk first of all about how that all transpired, the work that you had to do as majority leader to get that set of bills through, and then let's talk about the consequences. First, the process of getting the reforms passed.
Well, and the process, I think, was what should have changed if we're looking back on it. And the process was that you had a significant budget deficit, and then you had a Supreme Court decision that was basically saying that we were required to equalize the funding opportunities for certain urban districts with the wealthier suburban districts. The bottom line is there was tremendous. If you looked at it from just a strictly academic sense, there was a budget shortfall of great significance, and then the call for shifting the money, and of course we did not have a whole lot of money then, to urban education, and the lack of understanding, I think, publicly of those two issues, and our inability to explain those two issues and their interrelationship on a public level, I think, was really the caused our political failure in the governor's reelection, and certainly the legislature for a decade. So, and that really is the nub of I think how we didn't handle the issue as well as we could.
Did you feel that at the time?
I thought at the time that we were doing the best we could as far as trying to bifurcate those two issues and explain them to the public. But obviously, we didn't do a good job in that area.
Well, there's some folks in the administration who counseled very strongly to go ahead and do everything quickly, get it all done with, for two reasons. Number one, that the benefits of the changes would show up over a period of time, and number two, that the public would forget 3.5 years later, or that time would heal the wound 3.5 years later, and that the governor would spend all of his political capital and then bring it back up again to the point where he could get reelected. So there appears to have been a conscious decision to do it that way.
Oh, no question. And the consequences for the prediction that the governor would spend his political capital and be able to survive almost came true.
That's true.
So people don't recognize how close that, despite all the issues that we were dealing with, how the governor almost did survive.
Yeah.
Unfortunately,
but the
legislators' election was right up against those two issues. We were the next year, and that's when the legislature literally, the Democrats in the legislature were literally decimated by that. The governor had a year or two more time to try to lay out, as I say, bifurcate, explain the convergence of the massive budget shortfall and the court decision. The legislators did not have that time, nor in those days did the legislature have the resources to really get that message out.
What was your experience from, let's say, July, August of 1990 up through the election of 1991 in terms of what was it like to serve in the legislature? In terms of dealing with your constituency, what was it like to serve in the legislature?
It was a volatile time. It's extremely volatile. But again, I guess maybe it was youth or something. I thought we.
You weren't that young anymore at that point.
Yeah, well, no, I was experienced then.
Okay, right.
I was still relatively young, but it was difficult because.
You were getting hounded at every public meeting.
We were getting hounded at every public meeting, but the economy, general economy, was in a tough position. We had then the agitation of the NRA. They were. They were going to make sure that we paid
and the hands across New Jersey
and the
crowd.
hands across New Jersey crowd. So yeah, it was a difficult time to be in public office. So,
Did you run again in
92? I did not.
91.
91, I did not. Okay. I had made a decision again that I was going to leave government.
Did the year leading up to that have anything to do with it?
No, I had once I won in '89. I wanted to become the majority leader, and then I wanted to leave. And I remember telling Dick Cody, who was interested in becoming majority leader. I go, that I would not be long for the job. Of course, we laugh about it today because little did he know, nor I know, that the party would be decimated, and nobody there would
Nobody
be
would be
nobody
majority
worrying
leader.
about majority
Right.
leader for a while. So I had thought that I had again with mortgage, 4 kids, etc. I was ready. I was literally ready to move on, and told. I remember telling John Lynch that, and telling Dick Cody that. I don't think I ever told anybody else. My wife, obviously. My wife really wanted me to stay on. She's more the political junkie than even I was. But I had enough. I was I was in the middle of everything. I have felt that I was. By the way, I thought we could still win my district, whether I was running or not, and we almost did.
I was going to say you didn't.
Almost
you didn't.
did. Yeah, we did not,
Yeah.
and we did not, which I was really disappointed in. I thought that was really why perhaps I should have stayed on. But it was, I was more involved in the business. I was more involved in trying to take care of paying bills, and being, having 4 kids at the house. So I was running around trying to be do all things, and it was just.
So middle of 1991, you've made your decision. You're not going to run for re-election.
Yeah.
You're going to go back to South Jersey and focus on your insurance business and more time with your family. And then somehow that got delayed by a couple of years.
Yeah, it got delayed.
How did that happen?
Basically, I was made the decision to leave, and at the time the front office was in somewhat of an uproar, and an old friend of mine reappeared in the front office by the name of Joe Salima. And basically Joe asked that I stay, and asked that I become a part of the administration. And did he have a particular spot in mind at that point, or he just wanted you to be in Trenton? He wanted me to be in Trenton. He felt that I had relationships with the legislature that would be helpful to the governor, and that that there was a significant role I could play as far as those legislative relationships, as well as continuing public policy. And basically my promise to Joe was that I would stay through the first term, and then I'd go. And remember my father telling me that at that point, you will come home after this, because he was ready to leave the business. Okay. And so he was literally wanted to leave, and of course I'm still out tilting at windmills. And
do you think that Joe also felt as though Jim Florio needed as many of his old friends as he could have around him during the embattled second 2 years of his administration?
Yeah, I think he needed some. Joe felt that he needed people with sort of the retail political experience with the governor, that were loyal to the governor. He wanted them around during this time, because he knew it was going to be a particularly difficult time.
So how did the Department of State come to be the place where you landed?
Yeah, it really was. It was the governor's and Joe's idea. I think traditionally the Department of State was a political role.
Well, certainly. I mean, back in the days of Governors Minor and Hughes, and the Secretary of State was the chief political operative of the governor.
And I think that's what Joe had envisioned, that it was that would be the model, that you were there to support the political agenda of the governor,
which meant both relations with the legislature and with county and local officials of the party,
and retail, and certainly being a surrogate on behalf of the governor, and he felt that was a role, particularly in South Jersey,
Right.
that I could play.
So what was it like suddenly being in the executive branch of government after all those years in the legislature?
It was different. It was a different pace than the pace I was used to, because it was the sole thing that I did for me personally. When I was in the legislature,
much to your dad's regret, I guess. But
yes,
he's still running back on it.
Oh yeah, exactly. And when I was in the legislature, I was, literally I was doing I was at the business. I was trying.
Mondays and Thursdays you're in Trenton.
Monday and Thursday I'm in Trenton. I'm on the phone a lot,
right.
to Trenton, but I'm not in Trenton every day.
Right.
So there was a whole nother business life out there. So that part of it changed a lot. But it was enjoyable in the sense that Joe set up a group that met every morning. His feeling was that during the first part of the governor's term, that there wasn't a real focus, there wasn't a real message that was getting out on a daily basis. So he puts together this group called the Core Group. And
who was in that?
Basically, it was the Governor's Council at the time.
Was that Dakotas?
Bob Dakotas,
right.
Was part of it. Brenda Bacon,
right.
Was part of it. I was part of it. Joe certainly was part of it. I don't know if Jamie was part of it, Jamie Foxx at that
right.
point, but the whole focus of the Core Group was that there was going to be one single message getting out from a policy perspective during the day, and it was going to be focused, and the governor was going to be talking about it, and he felt that there wasn't that type of plan message development during the first term, that it was really scattered, and sort of events would dictate what the message was. So we were trying to be more in control of the message on behalf of the governor, and so that was and I enjoyed that. Again, it sort of gets into my policy development. It allows me to enjoy that. The other thing is I was still involved in the automobile insurance issue at the time. I was used as a surrogate because, as you well know, the commissioner was not allowed. The commissioner was supposed to be a
quasi-judicial
right. official. So I had the luxury of not having those ties. So when there was a need to go out and to lay out the governor's position on automobile insurance or something, I was the guy that would do it. I also had the opportunity to be involved in some education issues at the time. We had a new commissioner that I introduced to the governor, Mary Lee Fitzgerald.
Oh yeah.
And
how did you know her?
I knew her through Essex County and through
back to Essex
County, yeah. And I got to know her through a staffer in the Senate, Bob Noonan, who was Bob was very close to Mary Lee Fitzgerald. So those were types of things that I was able to do, and I enjoyed the opportunity. And then I would sit in on with various meetings about how the administration was going to address a multitude of issues and be part of that. So that was fun for me, and I enjoyed it. And even though the times were difficult, because usually there was folks parading outside the office every day.
And you had a hostile legislature.
Yeah, a hostile legislature.
How about you obviously had developed some relationships with across the aisle in the legislature. Were you called upon to work as best you could with Chakai Tyan and with who was the president of the Senate at the time? Trying to remember, it would have been Donnie DeFrancesco.
Yeah,
I
Donnie
guess.
D. Yeah.
That you must have had some relationship.
Yeah,
with
you
some
still.
of them. And you mentioned Bill Gormley.
Yeah, it was. There were still members of the legislature that I worked with. Jack Collins was a majority leader at the time in the assembly, and he was someone that he was a South Jersey guy that I was close to. And I had known Jack previous to both of our political lives. We went to the same high school. We're from the same area, so he was someone I was friends with. I had gotten close to John Bennett, who was not only someone I worked with, but he was a friend. On that side, I was close to John Lynch, who was still majority leader at the time. I was close to Dick Cody, who was a friend. So there were certain...
I think John was minority leader.
Minority, I'm sorry.
Yeah, right.
You're right, I'm sorry. And I wish he was majority leader at the time.
So does he.
Yeah, I'm sure. And so I still had friends in the legislature that I could go to and try to get the latest lay of the land about whatever issue that was before the legislature and the governor needed done.
How much interaction did you end up having during that 2-year period with the governor personally?
I thought I had access to the governor if and when I needed. If I had something that was worthy of him hearing, I had the ability to sit down with the governor.
Is that how one approaches one's relationship with the chief executive, that you don't want to bother that person with anything other than something that you think is something that belongs at his or her level?
Yeah, and that's exactly right. And there was something I could contribute positively to the discussion. And if I felt that there was, I was very mindful of his time. I was also mindful of the fact that there were many areas that people in the administration had greater expertise than me in certain issues. So I knew what I
you knew what you knew, and
I knew what I knew, and that was what I was going to talk to the governor about, and can make a contribution about.
He was also a notorious memo governor.
Yeah.
The famous capital letter TTM, talk to me.
Yeah.
If he wanted your input, and otherwise a lot of it was done by internal memo and passing of a memo that came to him along to someone else for comment. So I assume there was an awful lot of that was going on.
Yeah, there was a lot of that. And also I traveled with him a lot politically. So there was, I had the opportunity to travel with him. So I could talk to him about the issues that I thought were important, or again, what I could contribute. So I had that opportunity where maybe a lot of the folks didn't have that opportunity.
Now, as his term of office is coming to an end and he's running for re-election, and you absolutely know at this point that you are not going to stay on regardless of what happens.
Right.
Did you get involved in the campaign? How did you handle those last few months?
Well, again, I was sort of subject to whatever the campaign needed and wanted me to do. If they needed a surrogate in southern New Jersey, I was the surrogate in southern New Jersey. If they needed someone to go talk to a local county chairman or chairperson or a local politico, I would oftentimes be sent off to talk to whomever, the mayor or whatever. So I was used sort of as a liaison to the campaign, particularly in South Jersey, I thought.
Were you with the governor on election night?
Yes. Yeah, I was with them. I was with him at the initial part of the evening. My brother was running for the assembly at the time, and so I remember spending most of the evening with the governor. and then leaving. I guess we were up. It may have been up in East Brunswick. I'm not sure.
I think so.
Yeah, and went down to South Jersey.
At the point at which you left East Brunswick, did you know what the outcome was?
I thought we were going to lose. I wasn't sure of it, but you know.
By all accounts, on election night, he was less devastated than most of the people around him.
Yeah, I thought there was, and I remember thinking that the last couple of days that he was, you know, he understood that it was going to be very difficult for him to win re-election. He was not going to get clobbered. He was, and he didn't.
Yeah.
And he, I thought he ran an outstanding race. I wish we had explained the whole education issue a lot better during the race, because I think there's. I always thought that the urban areas underperformed for the governor, and those were the areas that he really stuck his neck out for, and they should have, if anything, overperformed for him, and that didn't occur. And so that was my political judgment at the time, was telling me that they didn't turn out.
Why do you think that happened? Do you think that there was still some resentment on the part of some leadership in those areas that they had lost the legislative election, and therefore they didn't feel as though they had a...
Internally, there was a debate going on in the campaign, and it was a debate that that you didn't want to shine a light on the Quality Education Act, because with most of the white independent suburban voters, it was not a political advantage.
No, and it had been largely repealed at that point as well.
My point always was, but it may not be, but you have to go into the urban areas and really target those areas and remind those folks that this is the governor that stuck their neck out for their kids and their education programs in those areas. And I didn't think we did that well. And I remember being in a meeting with James Carville at the time and making that point, and he said, "Danny, that in typical Southern drawl,
right,
that's like pushing a noodle up a mountain with your nose. It ain't you ain't gonna make an impact." But and I disagreed. But that's, he was running the campaign at the time.
So you were involved in some strategy
sessions
as well.
Yeah.
Here.
Yep. Yep. So and had an opportunity to meet James and be involved with him, and Paul Bagala, who's a great guy, and I enjoyed being around. And they were both characters.
Yeah,
they were just
absolute
fellows. Characters. Yeah. So.
One question that I had skipped over and want to get back to is that there are a number of people, and you would probably be in a position to judge this better than most, who think there was a pronounced change in Jim Florio's demeanor and, I don't want to say accessibility, warmth, humor, public persona after his marriage to Lucinda. Do you think that there is any truth to that?
Well, I think he from a public perspective, I would assume that there's truth, because Lucinda is a beautiful lady, and certainly, publicly it softened, I guess, the perception of the governor, and a warm lady. So I always, and again, because the length of time I was with the governor, from a personal perspective, it didn't change.
You always saw a warmer side of him, I guess. That
I always saw a side that was to the point.
Right.
He was.
So everybody saw that side.
Yeah, and also, a guy that I could joke around with, and he could joke around with me, and but we had that early on, so that didn't change too much for me.
Tell me about life for Dan Dalton after politics and public life. What have you been up to for the last 20 years?
Yeah, being very involved in the family business, which I sold 5 years ago, and just recently left the business totally in April. So I am no longer the insurance guy.
But I know you serve on some boards.
Yeah, we started, which I'm proud of, Boys and Girls Club in Gloucester County, which started out with a site in Glassboro. Now there's a site in Paulsboro and a site in Woodbury. So we've grown the Boys and Girls Club of Gloucester County, which I think is a terrific program. Involved on the board at Kennedy Hospital. Very involved on a community bank, Park Bank, a local bank in Gloucester County with branches in Atlantic County and Philadelphia. So they're some of the areas that I've been involved in.
You're called upon to be an elder statesman politically, or are you pretty much out of it?
I'm pretty much out of it. I was involved politically for a short period of time after I left office, but no longer, am in that role.
What involvement did you have?
Well, I was involved. I got involved with Senator Sweeney's race against Assemblyman Sweeney's race against Senator Zane. So I chaired that race, which got me totally back in the frying pan, and he was successful. But since then, I've pretty much I'm not involved politically anymore, and that's fine.
I was going to say,
fine.
And seems to make you happy.
Yes. I enjoy being busy, but I don't need to be running around with my hair on fire anymore.
I understand.
Yeah. So.
Well, we've enjoyed having you here.
Yeah, thanks, Rick.
Anything I should have asked you that I didn't?
No. I think the one thing that the point that I was thinking of on my way here that I wanted to make is that there's a generation of people in South Jersey that became involved politically because of Jim Florio, and I often think about that also as part of his legacy, because he. You take a look at Joe Roberts, and you take a look at myself, and you take a look at a host of other people in our area that got involved and got the opportunity to serve publicly because of Jim Florio. He really deserves a lot of credit for that because of the example that he set and because of the type of leader he was. He inspired people to get involved in it, and certainly myself. So I think that should be recognized as well.
A piece of the Florio legacy that we didn't have before we interviewed you. So, thank you very much for that and for your time today.
You're welcome. Thank you.